TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations.
Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israel reaffirms its unwavering determination to achieve victory in the Gaza Strip. U.S. President Donald Trump emphasizes that he does not accept Iran's response to the Witkoff proposal for a zero-enrichment nuclear deal. Iran threatens Israel over prospects of a looming strike against the Islamic Republic's nuclear infrastructure. The Madeleine, a Gaza-bound propaganda boat that was intercepted early yesterday morning by the IDF Navy, was towed to Ashdod port, and all of the 12 pro-Hamas activists who were on board are getting deported as we speak. French President Emmanuel Macron, whose country had 5 nationals partake in the propaganda voyage, seized the opportunity to highlight Paris's position vis-à-vis the war in the Gaza Strip.
D'abord, la France est vigilante et aux côtés de tous ses ressortissants.
First of all, France is on its guard and supports all its citizens when they are in danger, so of course we have sent all the messages to ensure the protection of our citizens, so that the consular protection they are entitled to is assured, and that as soon as they themselves have signed the authorizations they might come back to France. And the communication between our foreign ministries is constant. But then, and above all, France is calling for a ceasefire as soon as possible, and for the lifting of the humanitarian blockade. That's what's scandalous, what's unacceptable in Gaza, and what, since the beginning of March, is shameful. Shameful. So I spoke again to the President of the United States and the Emir of Qatar, who play an extremely important role in the negotiations, to discuss this, firstly to thank them for their work, and to say that now we need to finally get this ceasefire, the liberation of the hostages, and finally to reopen the humanitarian corridors. It's vital, and for the United Nations, with their agencies, with the accredited NGOs, can do their jobs with complete transparency. We're talking about children, people in a very serious condition today, elderly people who are dying every day because of this blockade and because the ceasefire hasn't been signed.
It's important to know that President Macron's remarks were made all the while at least one French national remains in Hamas captivity since October 7 of 2023 to date. In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in remarks to an annual commemoration ceremony of the Altalena affair, addressed internal strife between the separate political streams within Israel, emphasizing that the enemies of the Jewish state will not succeed in efforts to tear Israel's society apart.
There won't be a civil war. There will not be civil war in the state of Israel. Our enemies in the south, in the north, everywhere, they rejoice in every division within us. They themselves try to fan the flames of discord within us, out of the false hope that by doing so they will prevent us from realizing the goals of the war. I assure you, my dear friends, it will not help them. An overwhelming majority of the people stand firmly behind our heroic fighters, who are risking their lives for us. An overwhelming majority of the people support the total overthrow of the evil rule of Hamas. An overwhelming majority of the people reject with disgust those who, through extreme statements, and also extreme actions, try to push us into the abyss.
The Israeli premier went on to emphasize that Israel is not faced by a political war, rather an existential war that began on October 7 of 2023 with the horrific onslaught by the Islamist Hamas and its terror operatives against the residents of southern Israel.
We are not in a political war. We are in an existential war, a war against those who slaughtered us with terrible cruelty on October 7th, against those who refused and still refuse to release our hostages. We have already released 200. Yesterday we released the 200th hostage, 148 of whom are alive, 52 fallen, some in heroic operations by IDF soldiers. We stand up to those who repeatedly threaten to destroy us. We are paying heavy prices in the war, alongside the great achievements we have already achieved, and in the face of the great achievements we will yet achieve. If we give up prematurely, barbaric fanaticism will sweep us, the Middle East, and later the entire world.
Meanwhile, in the United States, U.S. President Donald Trump revealed a massive negotiation, as he put it, between the United States, Hamas, and Israel, revealing further that Iran was also involved in the diplomatic effort without giving additional information on the matter.
Gaza right now is in the midst of a massive negotiation between us and Hamas and Israel, and Iran actually is involved. And we'll see what's going to happen with Gaza. We want to get the hostages back. That's all I can tell you.
President Trump continued by addressing a phone conversation he had held with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night, which focused predominantly on the Islamic Republic of Iran, among other pressing issues.
Yeah, we discussed a lot of things, and it went very well, very smooth. We'll see what happens. You know, we're trying to do something with a country we just spoke about, Iran. I think you should negotiate this. You might be better. I think I'm going to send you today. What a good idea. This could have been the idea of the day. We'll have Dara get up and negotiate. They are good negotiators, but they're tough. Sometimes they can be too tough. That's the problem. So we're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death. And we've told them that, and I've told them that, and I hope that's the way it works out. But it might not work out that way. We'll soon find out.
Following the Ayatollah regime's response to the Trump administration's proposal vis-à-vis Iran's nuclear program, in which Tehran rejected the American demand to end its uranium enrichment, President Donald Trump underscored that the response was unacceptable.
We have a meeting with Iran on Thursday, so we're going to wait till Thursday.
And what's the main impediment to getting a deal?
Well, they're just asking for things that you can't do. They don't want to give up what they have to give up. You know what that is. They seek enrichment. We can't have enrichment. We want just the opposite. And so far, they're not there. I hate to say that because the alternative is a very, very dire one. But they're not there. They have given us their thoughts on the deal. And I said, you know, it's just not acceptable.
Topic for Prime Minister Netanyahu today when you spoke?
I would say, yeah. I don't know what else. I can talk about the weather.
It is important to note that Iran continues to maintain that it has a right to enrich as a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. Nevertheless, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi stressed that while it is true that enriching uranium per se is not a forbidden activity, Iran's quantity and purity levels of enrichment demand a response.
And I say it because it is true that enriching uranium per se is not a forbidden activity, which is something my Iranian counterparts always tell me, and they tell the world. So that is true. At the same time, when you accumulate and continue to accumulate, and you are the only country in the world that is doing something like this at a level which is very, very close to the level that you need to have a nuclear explosive device, then we cannot ignore it. It is not per se a forbidden activity, but we cannot ignore, and this is why we are looking at it.
Grossi was further asked about repeated threats by Israel, warning that if diplomacy between Tehran and Washington failed, Jerusalem will order a strike against the Islamic Republic's nuclear program.
Well, of course, I am aware of the concerns in Israel. This is not new. Regarding the statements from the government or references to possible military action, of course, it is a matter for the Israeli government. What we are trying to do is to address this issue as befits an international organization from a different perspective. We are trying to get to a solution of this in a diplomatic way, trying to clarify and to solve this and not this tie without the use of violence or force, which we believe, if it's done correctly, which is of course very important, if it's done correctly, thoroughly, with a very strong verification and monitoring chapter from us, would give the necessary assurance for Israel and for the world that there is nothing to be feared.
Meanwhile, following his conversation with U.S. President Trump, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a security consultation. In tandem, the Ayatollah regime issued an unprecedented threat against Israel. The Iranian National Security Council issued the following statement, quote, "If the Zionist regime wants to take action against our nuclear centers and facilities, it will definitely and surely face our reaction. For the counterattack, the nuclear facilities of the regime will be targeted and operated upon with advanced weaponry." Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. As ever, it is important to highlight that TV7 Israel is a non-profit ministry with our productions 100% donation-based. Therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I would like to encourage you to donate. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Moreover, I'd like to encourage you also to pray for the hostages who've now endured 613 days in Hamas captivity. Pray also for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Essen wishing you an Erev Mevorach. God willing, we'll see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.